modern debate hall with tiered seating filled with legal scholars, journalists, and political figures. Center stage features 3 podiums: moderator Marcus Chen, respected legal journalist; in the middle, Rep. Jasmine Crockett to the left, and Judge Elizabeth Montgomery to the right. Camera pans across the audience, showing notable legal experts and politicians. Marcus. Authoritative, measured. Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Justice in America. I'm Marcus Chen. Tonight we bring you a crucial conversation at the intersection of law, justice, and political accountability. Camera focuses on Marcus. Marcus. Our democracy functions through a delicate balance of powers: legislative, executive, and judicial. But what happens when these powers come into conflict? When accountability and independence clash? These questions are at the heart of tonight's debate. Camera moves to Jasmine Crockett's podium. Marcus. Joining us tonight, Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas's 30th Congressional District. A former defense attorney and civil rights lawyer, Representative Crockett has become known for her passionate advocacy for judicial reform and accountability. Crockett nods confidently. Marcus. And facing her tonight, Judge Elizabeth Montgomery of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Appointed to the bench 8 years ago, Judge Montgomery has authored numerous influential opinions and is widely considered a judicial conservative with a strict constructionist approach to constitutional interpretation. Montgomery acknowledges with a slight nod. Marcus. Tonight's format is straightforward. Opening statements followed by moderated discussion across 3 topic areas, with an extended final segment for direct exchange. Reps Crockett, as the initiator of this debate, please begin with your opening statement. Camera zooms in on Crockett. Jasmine. Poised, measured, but with underlying intensity. Thank you, Marcus. And thank you to everyone watching who cares deeply about the future of our judicial system. I stand before you tonight not as a partisan, but as someone profoundly concerned about the integrity of our courts. The judiciary remains the least transparent branch of our government, often operating behind closed doors with lifetime appointments and minimal accountability mechanisms. Camera adjusts slightly. Jasmine. When I practiced law before becoming a legislator, I witnessed firsthand how the quality of justice often depends on who sits on the bench. A judge's personal beliefs, connections, and influences can dramatically impact outcomes, sometimes more than the law itself. My purpose tonight is simple: to advocate for a judiciary that is not only independent, but also accountable. Independence without accountability isn't justice, it's unchecked power. And in a democracy, unchecked power should concern us all, regardless of our political affiliations. Marcus. Thank you, Representative. Judge Montgomery, your opening statement. Judge Montgomery. Dignified, measured, slightly imperious. Thank you, Marcus. The independence of the judiciary isn't merely a philosophical principle, it's the bedrock of our constitutional system. For over 2 centuries, our courts have served as essential checks against governmental overreach and protectors of individual rights, precisely because judges can make decisions based on law rather than political pressure. Slight adjustment in posture. Judge Montgomery. What Representative Crockett frames as accountability often translates in practice to political interference. When legislators demand that judges answer to them or to public opinion, they fundamentally misunderstand the role courts play in our system. Judges must be faithful to the Constitution and the law, not to shifting political winds or partisan demands. True accountability comes through the appellate process, through scholarly critique, and through the transparent reasoning we provide in our written opinions. I welcome tonight's discussion, but approach it with concern about rhetoric that undermines judicial independence under the guise of accountability. Marcus. Let's begin with our first topic: current mechanisms for judicial accountability and their effectiveness. Representative Crockett, in your view, are existing accountability measures sufficient? Jasmine. direct, factual? The simple answer is no, they are not. The current system relies primarily on self-policing through judicial councils that rarely take meaningful action against colleagues. Graphics appear showing statistics. Jasmine. Consider the numbers. Over the past decade, thousands of complaints have been filed against federal judges. Less than 2% received any formal investigation, and fewer than a dozen resulted in significant consequences. This isn't accountability, it's a protection system. Moreover, financial disclosure requirements remain inadequate. Judges can accept educational trips funded by special interests with business before their courts. They can own investments in companies affected by their rulings, often with minimal disclosure requirements. Marcus. Judge Montgomery, how would you respond? Judge Montgomery. Composed, slightly defensive. These statistics without context paint a misleading picture. The vast majority of complaints against judges are properly dismissed because they're simply litigants unhappy with rulings, not actual misconduct. The judicial ethics system works precisely as designed to address genuine misconduct while protecting judges from politically motivated attacks. Independent courts require that protection. Slight adjustment of glasses. Judge Montgomery. As for financial disclosures, federal judges already face stricter requirements than many public officials. We file detailed annual reports, recuse ourselves from matters where conflicts exist, and face potential impeachment for serious violations. Jasmine. Interjecting. If I may, those detailed reports are often filed years late with minimal consequences, and recusal decisions are left entirely to each judge with no review mechanism. That's hardly rigorous accountability. Marcus. Judge Montgomery, should there be external review of recusal decisions? Judge Montgomery. Firmly. Absolutely not. External review would create precisely the political pressure the recusal system aims to prevent. Judges are bound by oath to follow ethical guidelines, and the overwhelming majority do so faithfully. Jasmine. Incredulous. So your position is essentially, trust us, the same position that has led to repeated scandals involving undisclosed gifts, conflicts of interest, and political activities by judges at all levels. Judge Montgomery. Coolly. My position is that isolated incidents, which get magnified by media attention, don't justify dismantling a system that has served our nation well for generations. Jasmine. Pressing. Isolated incidents. There have been at least 6 major ethics scandals involving federal judges in just the past 3 years. That's not isolated. It's a pattern that demands structural reform. Marcus. Let me press both of you on a specific point. Representative Crockett, what specific reforms would you propose that wouldn't impair judicial independence? Jasmine. 3 concrete reforms. First, an independent ethics committee with non-judges as members. Second, binding recusal standards with external review. And third, real-time disclosure of gifts, travel, and personal connections to parties with interests before the courts. Marcus. Judge Montgomery, which, if any of these, would you support? Judge Montgomery. Dismissive. None as described. Each would create mechanisms for political interference in judicial decision-making. Ethics committees dominated by non-judges wouldn't understand the judicial role. External recusal review would inject politics into case assignments, and excessive disclosure requirements would expose judges to harassment. The appropriate reforms would strengthen internal review processes while preserving judicial independence from legislative or executive control. Marcus. Let's move to specific situations that have raised accountability questions. Representative Crockett, you've been critical of several recent cases. Could you elaborate? Jasmine. Shifting to more intense tone. I'd like to focus on patterns rather than isolated incidents. What concerns me deeply is how certain judges consistently rule in favor of particular interests, especially when those same interests fund programs, conferences, or institutions affiliated with those judges. Screen displays graphics showing case patterns. Jasmine, take the Fifth Circuit where Judge Montgomery serves. Over the past 5 years, in cases involving major energy companies, certain judges have ruled in their favor over 90% of the time. Coincidentally, these same companies are major donors to law schools and policy institutes where these judges speak regularly. This isn't about individual cases. It's about patterns that raise legitimate questions about influences on judicial decision-making. Marcus. Judge Montgomery, how do you respond to this pattern analysis? Judge Montgomery, visibly tense but controlled. This type of statistical manipulation is precisely what threatens judicial independence. Correlation is not causation. Judges rule based on law and facts, not affiliations. Straightens posture. Judge Montgomery. The Fifth Circuit handles numerous complex regulatory and corporate cases. That certain industries frequently prevail reflects the legal merits of their positions and the applicable legal standards, not improper influence. This kind of insinuation without specific evidence of misconduct is exactly why judges need protection from political attacks. Jasmine. Leaning forward. Is it political attack to note that you, specifically, Judge Montgomery, have ruled in favor of Meridian Energy in all 7 cases before you, while having accepted over $30,000 in travel expenses from the Judicial Education Institute, which receives over half its funding from Meridian? Audible murmurs from audience. Judge Montgomery, clearly caught off guard. That characterization grossly misrepresents both my judicial record and the nature of judicial education programs. The institute you reference provides valuable legal education to hundreds of judges and has proper funding firewalls. Jasmine, pressing advantage. Firewalls? The institute's own tax filings show that Meridian's CEO sits on the advisory board that approves judicial participants in programs. You've attended their luxury retreats 3 times while cases involving Meridian were pending on your docket. Judge Montgomery. Defensive. Those educational programs were fully disclosed and completely appropriate. My rulings were based solely on the legal merits of each case. Jasmine. Yet you failed to disclose in your financial reports that your husband was employed as a consultant by Meridian's subsidiary during 2 of those cases. That information only came to light through investigative reporting. More pronounced reaction from audience. Marcus. Trying to regain control. Judge Montgomery, would you like to address that specific allegation? Judge Montgomery. Regaining composure. My husband's professional activities are distinct from my judicial work. Any consulting work he performed was properly disclosed to the extent required by judicial ethics rules. This attempt to create the appearance of impropriety through innuendo is precisely why many qualified individuals decline to serve as judges. Jasmine. Calmly. It's not innuendo to cite public records. Your disclosure forms from 2019 and 2020 contain no mention of your husband's relationship with Meridian subsidiaries, despite ethics rules explicitly requiring such disclosure for household members. Judge Montgomery. Tightly controlled. As I recall, that particular relationship was structured as an independent contractor arrangement that didn't trigger the specific disclosure requirement at that time. The rules have since been clarified. Jasmine, with raised eyebrow, convenient interpretation. Marcus, let's refocus on the structural question. Where is the appropriate line between legislative oversight and judicial independence? Judge Montgomery? Judge Montgomery, regaining authoritative tone. The Constitution establishes clear boundaries. Congress has the power to establish courts, set jurisdictional limits, and in extreme cases, impeach judges for genuine misconduct. What Congress cannot constitutionally do is attempt to influence specific judicial outcomes or punish judges for decisions legislators dislike. That principle dates back to the founding of our republic. References document. Judge Montgomery. As Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 78, judicial independence is essential in a limited constitution, precisely to protect against legislative overreach. When representatives like Congresswoman Crockett demand that judges explain their reasoning to legislative committees, or suggest that certain patterns of decisions justify investigation, they cross that constitutional line. Marcus. Representative Crockett, where do you see the boundary? Jasmine, thoughtful but firm. I agree with Judge Montgomery about the constitutional principle, but disagree about its application. Legislative oversight doesn't mean dictating outcomes in specific cases. It means ensuring the judiciary as an institution maintains its integrity. When judges fail to disclose conflicts, accept valuable gifts from parties with interest before them, or participate in overtly political activities, that's not about judicial reasoning. It's about basic ethical standards that preserve public trust. Gestures emphatically. Jasmine. Congress not only can but must address these issues. The judiciary has repeatedly demonstrated it cannot effectively police itself. That's not attacking independence. It's preserving the legitimacy that makes independence sustainable. Judge Montgomery. Dismissive. That framing assumes widespread misconduct with minimal evidence. The vast majority of judges serve with impeccable integrity under increasingly difficult conditions. Jasmine. I don't question that most judges serve honorably. I question a system that protects those who don't. And speaking of protecting, those who don't. Pulls out document. Jasmine. Judge Montgomery, are you aware that as chair of the Fifth Circuit's Judicial Council Ethics Committee, you dismissed complaints against Judge Raymond Thornton despite documented evidence that he accepted hunting trips worth over $150,000 from litigants who appeared before him? Audible reaction from audience. Judge Montgomery, visibly unsettled. I cannot discuss confidential judicial council proceedings. Those processes are confidential by design. Jasmine. Pressing. The confidentiality is meant to protect the process, not to hide misconduct. The complainants in that case have now publicly released their evidence, including your dismissal letter that stated no further investigation was warranted despite photographic evidence and financial records. Judge Montgomery. Struggling to maintain composure. Without discussing specific cases, the council's decisions are based on careful evaluation of all evidence and applicable standards. If complainants have chosen to violate confidentiality, that doesn't change the integrity of the process. Jasmine. Incredulous. The integrity of a process that dismissed documented evidence of six-figure gifts from litigants? That's precisely why external accountability is essential. Marcus. We've now reached our final segment, where our participants can engage directly with minimal moderation. Representative Crockett, you may begin. Jasmine. Standing straight, intensity building. Judge Montgomery, throughout this debate you've presented yourself as a defender of judicial integrity while dismissing legitimate concerns as political attacks. But your own record reveals a troubling pattern of selective ethics enforcement and personal conflicts. Camera zooms in gradually. Jasmine. Let's be specific. 3 years ago, you authored a major opinion striking down environmental regulations affecting the natural gas industry. You failed to disclose that your spouse owned over $250,000 in stock in companies directly benefiting from that decision. Judge Montgomery. Defensive. Those holdings were in broadly diversified energy funds, not direct investments in litigants. They didn't require recusal under applicable standards. Jasmine. Pressing. The funds you reference were sector-specific funds with over 40% of their holdings in the exact companies benefiting from your ruling. The Judicial Ethics Office has since clarified that such concentrated holdings do indeed require disclosure and recusal. Judge Montgomery, increasingly uncomfortable. Ethics standards evolve over time. I've always followed them as understood when making decisions. Jasmine, building intensity. Then let's discuss your role in the Judicial Conference's Ethics Advisory Committee, where you voted against strengthening disclosure requirements for family members' financial interests. You argued such requirements would be unduly burdensome, without disclosing your own family's potential conflicts. Takes out another document. Jasmine, I have here the transcript from that closed session, where you specifically advocated against requiring disclosure of spouses' business clients even when those clients have matters before the judge. Judge Montgomery, visibly rattled. Those committee deliberations are confidential for good reason, to allow frank discussion of complex issues without political pressure. Jasmine, voice rising. Confidentiality to enable frank discussion is one thing. Secrecy to hide self-serving decisions is quite another. The public has a right to know when judges are making ethics rules that directly benefit their own financial situations. Audience reaction growing. Judge Montgomery, attempting to regain control. Representative Crockett, these distortions and attempts to sensationalize complex ethical considerations demonstrate precisely why judicial deliberations require protection from political theater. Jasmine, now fully passionate. Is it political theater to expect basic disclosure? Is it political theater to question why you personally blocked ethics investigations into 6 fellow judges who had accepted luxury trips from the same industry groups that fund your speaking engagements? Judge Montgomery, defensive. Those characterizations are completely false. The Judicial Council operates by majority vote with careful consideration of established standards. Jasmine, reaches for final document. Then how do you explain this email from you to Judge Wilson, obtained through a FOIA request to the administrative office, where you wrote, and I quote directly, "We need to handle the Branson complaint quietly. Too much scrutiny of these conference arrangements would cause problems for many of us who attend similar events." Audible gasps from audience. Jasmine, at full intensity. This is the problem. The system isn't protecting judicial independence. It's protecting judicial privilege. It's enabling a small circle of judges to accept valuable benefits while ruling on cases affecting their benefactors. Judge Montgomery, standing visibly angry. That email has been taken completely out of context. The concerns were about protecting legitimate judicial education from being mischaracterized, exactly as you're doing now. Jasmine, unfazed. Then provide the context, Judge. Explain how that statement means anything other than a deliberate attempt to shield questionable practices from proper review. Judge Montgomery, struggling. The full conversation involved complex considerations about preserving judicial education opportunities while ensuring proper ethical guidelines. Selective quotation creates a false impression. Jasmine, the full email thread has been published by the Justice Accountability Project. Nothing in it changes the clear meaning of your statement. You were explicitly working to shield a colleague from scrutiny over accepting expensive trips from litigants. Jasmine, building to crescendo, and this is why legislative oversight is essential, because the current system allows judges to protect each other from accountability while claiming independence whenever anyone questions these practices. Dramatic pause. Jasmine, voice deliberately lowered but intense. You speak of judicial independence as if it's an unlimited privilege rather than a conditional trust. True independence requires integrity. It requires transparency. It requires accountability. Without those elements, it's not independence, it's impunity. Judge Montgomery, angry. These personal attacks and distortions are precisely what threatens the judiciary's ability to make decisions based on law rather than political pressure, you're undermining an institution essential to our constitutional system. Jasmine. Calm but forceful. No, Judge Montgomery, you've undermined it yourself. Every time you concealed conflicts, every time you protected colleagues from legitimate scrutiny, every time you crafted ethics rules with loopholes that benefited you personally. Looks directly at Montgomery. Jasmine. The greatest threat to judicial independence isn't congressional oversight or ethics reform. It's judges who abuse their position while hiding behind independence as a shield from accountability. Turns to address audience directly. Jasmine. Voice rising in powerful conclusion. That's the real threat, a judiciary that protects its own privileges while claiming to protect the Constitution. A system where some judges believe themselves accountable to no one, where legitimate questions are dismissed as attacks and transparency is treated as a threat. This isn't about partisan politics. It's about whether we truly have equal justice under law or a system where some remain beyond accountability. It's about whether judicial independence serves the public or serves itself. Marcus. Trying to regain control. Judge Montgomery, your final response? Judge Montgomery. Visibly shaken, but attempting dignity. What we've witnessed tonight is precisely the kind of political spectacle that demonstrates why judges must be protected from congressional overreach. Representative Crockett has twisted isolated incidents, taken statements out of context, and painted a false picture to advance a political agenda. Straightens papers, trying to regain composure. Judge Montgomery. The American people should understand what's really happening and attempt to pressure courts to reach politically desired outcomes by threatening judges with exactly this kind of public character assassination. True judicial independence, which has protected Americans' rights for generations, cannot survive such tactics. I stand by my record, my integrity, and my commitment to constitutional principles. And I trust the American people to see this performance for what it is. Jasmine. Calmly. The American people deserve to know the truth about how their judicial system actually operates. If transparency feels like character assassination, perhaps that reveals more than any document could. Marcus. Clearly overwhelmed by the exchange. This concludes our special debate on judicial accountability. I want to thank Representative Crockett and Judge Montgomery for this illuminating discussion. Marcus. The documents referenced tonight will be available on our website for public examination, along with responses from all parties mentioned.